Look at these communist tactics they use. Be normal and obey. The one that doesn't care about others. That's such bullshit. Bullshit. God damn it. This makes me so angry. I will not be brainwashed into this shit. God damn it.
Stagnation. Failed commercial and industrial projects.
On the list of bad ideas, up there with invading Russia during the winter, look at cults from an academic perspective because they are one of the few real instances where real mind control is really used in real life.
Nobody wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to go join a cult.
That's Mia Donovan, and she's an expert on cults since she made a movie about them. Available on Netflix.
Nobody in a cult will say they're in a cult.
Similarly, nobody in Minnesota will admit they actually live in Canada, but that doesn't make it not true. So what is a cult? Well, most of these groups have a front as a Bible study or political or some other sort of group, but what makes a cult is often that overwhelming influence the leader has over their followers. One could call it brainwashing. Now, the actual process of brainwashing is somewhat disappointingly abstract and inconcrete. There's no three-step guide to brainwashing your cult followers. The process is more of an art than a science. So here's our scientific three-step guide to brainwashing your cult followers.
The first stage is break people down. Get them broken.
That's Rick Ross, no relation, and he's also an expert on cults. He calls this process coercive persuasion.
Because just the idea that there is a shark out there somewhere, that perception keeps people out of the water, right? And it's amazing the power of perception.
You get invited to a talk or a dinner by a group of people that you've never met before, and suddenly you're like the center of attention. And everybody's showering you with affection and praise and interest. And this is something that a lot of cults will do because that's a very irresistible thing, to be at the center of somebody's attention.
Making people feel special is an overwhelmingly great feeling that traps them in. Overall, in this stage, you need to, as Rick says,
talk about everything negative in the world, negative in their life, put a lot of pressure on them to crack and break. And then second, change them. Once they're in that broken state, introduce your ideas.
So now they introduce the DNA vaccines. People are freaked out of their minds because of this COVID. So they will be more open to utopian, dangerous ideas. Like this shit. How can this be a good idea?
As a cult leader, you'll probably have some sort of mission for your followers, whether it be political, religious, or something else. This second stage is where you fix it in your followers' minds. And people won't necessarily accept what you say immediately because, if you're a cult leader, you're probably saying something controversial, something novel, something anti-conformist along the lines of doomsday is coming. That was just an example. The reason brainwashing works within a cult is because there is that peer pressure. Things that seem normal in the real world seem that way because everyone accepts them. While abnormal things seem normal in a cult environment because everyone within the group accepts them.
And a lot of it's accomplished by environmental control, social isolation, information control.
Because everyone within the group accepts them.
And a lot of it's accomplished by environmental control, social isolation.
Leaders create a new normal by manufacturing people's worlds.
Socialist leader John Dewey's textbook still used today. He said, "Dependency is a power, individuality an illness." There you have it. That's a very powerful tool. Peer pressure. You are bullied if you stand out. You learn that at school, the hard way sometimes. And then you will do everything to fit in. Difference should be celebrated, not bullied. These are communist tactics. Verbal abuse, emotional abuse, especially harming someone's reputation. The Chinese did that. Total humiliation. Sometimes they had to stand there for hours. This metal chain cutting into the flesh. Very heavy wooden shield. And all that crowd cheering. That's madness. And you don't see Mao in this. You see people doing Mao's bidding. And losing face in China is very bad. Nowadays we have cyberbullying. Somebody can be completely discredited just by a tweet. And then there is the physical punishment. Very old tactic, used everywhere to curse people into obedience. And then you create insanity. Thereupon the sane are insane. The dependent is sane as he needs the community. The collective is the norm. There it is, the brainwashing. Created a United Nations obliquely opposed to US positions. As other commissions were formed, as UNESCO, etc., the socialist-communist tilt has continued. In the year 1978, we come to the political concept of global warming, a United Nations fostered invention, foreign interference disguised as crisis management. And then we come to the political correctness defined in 1948. Max Forster Eastman. Max was an American who first believed in the communist utopian plan, portrayed in the writings and speech, and second, who came to be devout anti-communist when he confronted the truth of the deceit. Max Eastman noted this in foreword of book titled The Whole of Their Lives by Benji Gidlove. Moral civilization is in peril. Those consecrating themselves to communism must not only cast out truth, mercy, crime, and self-abasement. They must endorse such maxims as these. We do not believe in external principles of morality. Communist morality is identical with the fight to strengthen the dictatorship of the proletariat. We must be ready to employ trickery, deceit, law-breaking, withholding and concealing truth. We can and must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, scorn, and the like toward those of differing opinion. Political correctness is communist speak. First, deceit. The action or practice of concealing or misrepresenting the truth. Second, peril, serious and immediate danger. Third, hate. Feel intense, passionate dislike for someone or something. Probably those who are different, who do not obey the masses. By fostering through propaganda. Therefore, the media is telling you something that is not the truth. It's only propaganda. Communism. Word does not exist in the 1829 of the English language, as happens today. The word is a corruption of commune and communion as a distinct philosophy. 5. Truth. That which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. 6. Crime. An action or omission that constitutes an offense that may be punished by the state. 7. External principles belonging to or forming the structure of something, fundamental truth. 8. Dictatorship, absolute authority in any sphere, as in a country governed by a dictator. 9. Trickery, the practice of deception. 10. Law-breaking, a person who breaks the law, with intent, in this case, violent unionism. 11. Withhold, conceal. Refuse to give something that is due, prevent from being known or noticed. Camouflage. 12. Revulsion, a sense of disgust or loathing. 13. Scorn, the feeling or belief that someone or something is worthless or despicable. Again, those who do not obey, usually. Contempt for those who are different. 14. Civilization, the society, culture, and way of life of a particular area. Gaslighting is the attempt of one person to overwrite another person's reality. It is a tactic used for gaining power and control. Is someone using every trick in the book to control you? Anger and dirty looks to intimidate you? Guilt-tripping to render you helpless? gaslighting and trying to make you think you are crazy, blaming and shaming, pushing past your boundaries, refusal to own their part of the problem, creating emotional storms to wear you down. You just might be suffering from coercive control tactics. Don't fall for control tactics.
Given the historical importance of Solzhenitsyn's book, as well as its great personal impact on me. The Gulag Archipelago, in its full form, was a 3-volume text originally written between 1958 and 1968. It first saw publication in 1973 and was translated into English a year later. It describes life in the Soviet forced labor camp system, the Gulag, through a narrative compiled from interviews, personal statements from inmates, diaries, legal and historical documents, and the author's own experience as a Gulag prisoner. Following its appearance, the book circulated underground in the Soviet Union until its formal publication in 1989 in the literary journal Novy Mir, which published a third of the work in 3 issues. Since the Soviet Union dissolved, the entire book has been published and has been made mandatory reading in the Russian school curriculum. The 50th anniversary edition is slated for release November 1st, 2018. Here's a brief biography of the author, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, from the book. Solzhenitsyn was born in 1918 and grew up in Rostov-on-Don. He graduated in physics and mathematics from Rostov University and studied literature by correspondence course at Moscow University. In World War II, he fought as an artillery officer, attaining the rank of captain. In 1945, however, after making derogatory remarks about Stalin in a letter, he was arrested and summarily sentenced to 8 years in forced labor camps, followed by internal exile. In 1957, he was formally rehabilitated and settled down to teaching and writing. Here's a description of the book from the back cover. The officially approved abridgment of the Gulag Archipelago, Volumes 1, 2, and 3. A vast canvas of camps, prisons, transit centers, and secret police, of informers and spies and interrogators, but also of everyday heroism. The Gulag Archipelago is Alexander Solzhenitsyn's grand masterwork. Based on the testimony of some 200 survivors and on the recollection of Solzhenitsyn's own 11 years in labor camps and exile, it chronicles the story of those at the heart of the Soviet Union who opposed Stalin and for whom the key to survival lay not in hope but in despair. A thoroughly researched document and a feat of literary and imaginative power, this edition of the Gulag Archipelago was abridged into 1 volume at the author's wish and with his full cooperation. Doris Lessing, 1919 to 2013, a British novelist, playwright, librettist, biographer, and short story writer, and winner of the 2007 Nobel Prize for Literature, says of the Gulag Archipelago, "It helped to bring down an empire. Its importance can hardly be exaggerated." This is Solzhenitsyn's own foreword to the original abridgment. I dedicate this to all those who did not live to tell it, and may they please forgive me for not having seen it all, nor remembered it all, for not having divined it all. If it were possible for any nation to fathom another people's bitter experience through a book, how much easier its future fate would become, and how many calamities and mistakes it could avoid. But it is very difficult. There always is this fallacious belief. It would not be the same here. Here, such things are impossible. Alas, all the evil of the 20th century is possible everywhere on earth. Yet I have not given up all hope that human beings and nations may be able, in spite of all, to learn from the experience of other people without having to live through it personally. Therefore, I gratefully accept Professor Erickson's suggestion to create a 1-volume abridgment of my 3-volume work, The Gulag Archipelago, in order to facilitate its reading for those who do not have much time in this hectic century of ours. I thank Professor Erickson for his generous initiative, as well as for the tactfulness, the literary taste, and the understanding of Western readers which he displayed during the work on the abridgment. Edward E. Erickson, Jr., 1939 to 2017, who served as the editor of the abridged single-volume version of the Gulag Archipelago, was Professor Emeritus of English at Calvin College, and the author of many other books, including The Solzhenitsyn Reader, The Apocalyptic Vision of Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, and The Soul and Barbed Wire, an introduction to Solzhenitsyn. This is what he had to say when he introduced the abridged version. In 1994, after 20 years of forced exile in the West, Alexander Solzhenitsyn returned to Russia. At one town meeting held on his Trans-Siberian whistle-stop tour to reacquaint himself with his homeland, he was confronted by this rebuke. "It is you and your writing that started it all and brought our country to the verge of collapse and devastation. Russia doesn't need you. So, go back to your blessed America." Solzhenitsyn instantly replied that to his dying day he would keep fighting against the evil ideology that was capable of slaying 1/3 of his country's population. The meeting erupted in applause. That sort of exchange was unimaginable when the present abridgment of the Gulag Archipelago first appeared in 1985. Almost no one expected then that within a few years the Soviet Union would collapse, and almost in a day, like the legendary one-horse shay. Yet now the dramatic events that put the closing punctuation mark on the Soviet parentheses in Russian history have also, we may say, brought an end to what the great Russian poet Anna Akhmatova called the true 20th century. This foreshortened century, running from 1914 to 1917 to 1989-1991, was the era when utopian dreams rooted in Enlightenment optimism came to rely on brute force to make ideological schemes prevail.
Knowledge of ecological impulse transmitted constant feed coordination back into the dark and delivered to the destination.
Many of the cybernetics members were now talking literally about constructing an artificial matrix.
A matrix is supposed to give birth, not receive. And yet what I want to talk about is very definitely the birth of a matrix. The matrix has been a growing thing, getting more and more complex, wider and wider in its scope.
It's a matrix. Look at the matrix which embeds. So everything is sitting in one big thing embedded in a matrix.
As Alex Bavelos of MIT noted in his group dynamics studies.
We are attempting now to describe the operation of a net in terms of the probability that there will be a message from A to B in a given time period. We plot the net as a matrix. We put ones where there is a link, and zeros where there is no direct link.
At stake was the unveiling of an entirely new paradigm, one which encompassed a holistic view of control that could potentially govern the world and the mind. The system they came up with required that individuals and society be placed in a common communications network, developed into an artificial nervous system. Like other Macy's attendees, J.C.R. Licklider had been activated by wartime research. His experiments in modeling the human brain with psychoacoustic factors at Harvard overlapped with secretive contract work that revolved around how the human nervous system reacted to electronic stimuli.
Behavior tied to appetite was couched in the same terms as that for self-steering torpedoes and self-training guns.
Like so many computers, machines, and other controllable factors, man could be placed in a technical loop, and his behavior modified.